I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Masters of Controlled Chaos. And this month, I'm going to be looking at a director who was well appreciated at his time, but has sort of maybe lost his share in the film community today. However, I still think he is a phenomenal director and should be respected and looked upon and studied. I'm talking about none other than William Wyler. So, if you guys are new to the series, what I do every single month is I do a deep dive, 30 to 40 minute videos of a director's filmography and talk about the central idea of what makes them great, and I look at 3 films that really define their career. Now, you may be thinking, Connor, what do you mean 3 films that define their career? Well, I'm doing a bit of a change up for the series. Before I used to do, best, favorite, underrated, but as I'm going through these directors' filmographies that I haven't seen really any of their movies at all, I decided to change up the format and really sort of keep it once a month, but really look at 3 films, because sometimes the best and the favorite sort of overlap, and what's considered underrated, is it Rotten Tomatoes or Oscars or on lists that I'm basing it off of? It's hard to say, so I just changed the format now just to 3 films that really define his or her career. And just a little update for Masters of Controlled Chaos. I'm doing it this month. I'm doing it for September and October, and then I'm going to transition into my old Oscar countdown sort of Oscar coverage. I'm going to be keeping my podcast going during that time, so stay tuned for that and just listen. I'll have the podcast Connor the Contrarian, which, if you don't know, I'm posting that here as well. But for this series, I'm planning on at least sort of restarting it in May or June. Same format. I know I sort of late now to change the format, but I felt for these last 3 episodes I really want to give it my all, and the format we were doing before just really wasn't working. I really want to give you those 30 to 40 minute videos, and if I'm talking about Francois Truffaut in just one movie, then am I really talking about Francois Truffaut? So I do watch a lot of these guys' movies, 15, 16 other movies for the first time in preparation for these episodes. So I do really want to talk about these movies that I really enjoy instead of just picking 1 or picking 2. So I picked 3 solid films that define his career. Just want to let you know that's the update for this channel, what's coming sort of forward. So Old on Old is going to continue until the Oscar season starts. This is going to continue for this episode and 2 more. And then Connor the Contrarian will continue as the Oscar season picks up, and that will sort of continue all year round. So I'm really excited about the content I'm making, and I'm really excited about this episode. So let's transition into what makes William Wyler great. Now, what I love about William Wyler is his ability to work in so many different genres. Actually, while looking at his career trajectory, it was interesting. I mentioned at the top of the show, at the time he was seen as an incredible director of the likes of John Ford. But if you look at guys I've all covered, John Ford, Alfred Hitchcock, Billy Wilder, I don't think they were as appreciated at the time as they were before. So guys like Billy Wilder and Alfred Hitchcock are sort of gaining sort of more cult status and sort of more appreciated now. And now people see Billy Wilder, he's an incredible director. Alfred Hitchcock, I cover them in Masters of Controlled Chaos before William Wyler. Why is that? Because he hasn't maybe made as much movies that have sort of, for some reason or another, he was well appreciated at the time. He was the big Oscar guy, won many Oscars, won 3 directing Oscars, well appreciated. But I think today, people don't go back and look on his films the same way they look at Alfred Hitchcock's movies, even though I think a lot of his movies hold up the same way. It's weird, and it's sort of an interesting deep dive when I went into his career, because I was like, oh wow, I enjoy a lot of these movies, especially, his sort of 40s, 50s, and even his 60s. A lot of his 60s stuff I think is very accessible, with movies like The Big Country, which is 58, I guess, but Children's Hour and The Collector and Ben-Hur. I think these movies are very accessible today, with incredible, beautiful color cinematography, so that doesn't even hurt people. But then you look back at movies, like Best Years of Our Lives, or The Heiress, or The Letter. I think these movies totally hold up, even though they're in black and white. And he's one of those directors that really made just a lot of movies before he got into sound. He made a lot of silent pictures and really a lot of movies throughout his career. So I didn't look back into a lot of his silent picture stuff, but that's just because a lot of them aren't accessible, which is an issue with these sort of classic movies that you run into sometimes. But William Wyler's movies, for the most part, were pretty accessible. But like I said at the top, he does work with a lot of genres. He's like a guy like Rob Reiner or Stanley Kubrick. And as a matter of fact, I was sort of watching his movies and reading more about him, and I was like, this guy's almost the yin to the yang of Stanley Kubrick. Like Kubrick, he works in many different genres. You have epics like The Big Country and Ben-Hur. You have crime films like The Desperate Hours and The Letter. Then you have sort of these proper dramas like The Heiress and Jezebel and Wuthering Heights. so he was able to sort of master almost every single genre in that way, and it was always sort of challenging himself to do something different, and nailed a lot of genres, even something like a romantic comedy like Roman Holiday, which he really didn't sort of do again, really. I guess How to Steal a Million, sorry. Was similar in that, but that was kind of like a heist film. But really, it just showed how talented he is, because he was able to move from genre to genre, because each one was sort of interesting to him in his own unique way. But also, like Kubrick, he was also known for having a lot of takes, and was a bit of a perfectionist. One time, he did 40 takes, and there was no direction in between. It was just like, do it better. And because he sort of trusted his own taste, and actors trusted his taste, he had a very incredible taste in that way, because he actually got a lot of his actors Oscars, like Charlton Heston, his first Oscar, and Audrey Hepburn and Bette Davis. He gave them all Oscars, and sort of, even though he was maybe tough, he always got the best performances out of his actors. And I think Wyler he was known for that, and he was also very good at treating his actors, and that's what sort of makes him a great master of controlled chaos, because he was focused on everything going on with his actors, making sure the technical thing was there, by having talented people like Greg Toland, an incredible cinematographer of Citizen Kane and whatnot, a very prolific sort of 40s cinematographer. And that allows his movies to have incredible sort of depth and layers. But really, he's opposite of Kubrick, because in a lot of ways, he's very emotional. Stanley Kubrick's movies are very emotionally cold. Look at something like 2001 Space Odyssey, the way they deliver the lines, it's very emotionally cold, very distant. But his movies are so inherently based on the emotion. The Best Years of Our Lives is so emotional. Roman Holiday has to do with the emotions of each other. Ben-Hur is about, Ben Judah Hur trying to figure out his emotions and his revenge and dealing that with God. I mean, so much about the character's journey and the character's struggle. And he has sort of the technical expertise of a Kubrick, and has a sort of perfectionist sort of look to it, but he was able to get incredible performances out of his actors, but also really focus on that emotional tug that really holds a lot of his movies together. Something like The Children's Hour, it's the emotional investment in these characters, the same way with The Best Years of Our Lives. Even something like The Heiress or The Letter. These are movies that all require you to really emotionally attach to those characters. And really, in terms of his visual style, or just his style throughout his movies, the one thing I noticed was that, I call it at least, it's like almost what a play could be. Now, plays, the problem with them, or the sort of limitation, we'll say, is that they have one scene at a time. They can only show one thing, then they can transition, but, sometimes they show the transition, sometimes they don't. Something like Hamilton or whatever has one just sort of big structure that they move in and out. Different plays do it different ways creatively, but with movies, you can go all different places and do it from different angles, which is why I think film is one of the greatest art forms of all time, because it sort of combines music and literature and all these great visuals and plays, and sort of together in a very unique way. But the plays, I say that because he always has a central location. Think in The Children's Hour, the boarding school. He looks at the boarding school, and the boarding school is incredibly incredibly layered, and there's so much different little nooks and crannies that you can look in the background for. But also, he looks and explores different people's houses, and different sort of the outside he explores a lot. So or in Roman Holiday, you have Gregory Peck's apartment, which they're there a lot, but then they explore all of Italy and have great different scenarios there. Or I think most potently in The Heiress, where you have the central sort of main house, right? But then they go outside, and that's almost sort of a visual metaphor of prison, of sort of her prison, Olivia de Havilland's prison, with her father. So there's so many great things that he uses a central location that has incredible sort of architecture and really explores that place very well. But then also looks at different places. He makes a lot of these books and things that he adapts very cinematic by just looking and making sure the central location is well respected for and well utilized, but then goes to different places and uses different sets and makes it feel like a movie, which is what I love about his movies and what I hate about certain plays where you just do sort of one sort of location. It's boring. It's not that creative. It's not that emotionally engaging. It doesn't feel that cinematic. And another thing I'm a fan of is his editing. I think that he does a great shot choices so that his editing makes it a lot easier for him. In the 40s, he used Greg Toland, which used those sort of ultra sort of focus and ultra depth wides. So he was able to sort of hold in the wide and still have people in frame. I talked about in the Best Years of Our Lives episode. That's an incredible shot there. But also I think that the way he sort of chooses certain shots and doesn't give you the easy answers. Think of the Roman holiday at the end, where you just see the princess shaking the hands of everyone, almost as the events of the film didn't take place, and they never cut to an easy shot, reverse shot, close up one another as they sort of look at each other. It's not that easy. It just sort of goes and takes a step back, and it's a beautiful moment. Or think of The Big Country, with the ending, where there's just this wide, you just see these two men shoot each other and to show the sort of minusculeness of them all. The shots he chooses, and the way he edits the movie, and the way he sort of, his unconventional style of filming these climactic sequences, really give you such an emotional punch, because they tell you what it means to be told. It tells you that this is the story I'm trying to tell. It tells you that this is the message I'm trying to send. And Wyler does an incredible job at that, I think. And I think that even though some of his movies have that sort of emotional pull, some people call it melodramatic. I wouldn't say so. I hate when that's sort of a criticism, because melodrama is a type of drama. But I think that it seems melodramatic because you just care so much about the characters that it seems, sort of, because you care so much about the characters, you feel the tragedy that they feel. They feel the sort of heartbreak, the sort of life or death choices that they're feeling in this sort of monumental time in their life. He's an incredible director, a great master of controlled chaos, even though he can be a pain on set. He creates incredible performances, has the technical aspects in there, and makes sure in the studio system, which was hard to do, to make sure that his vision was seen, and that his edit ultimately was the one that sort of was shot and was seen, and that they didn't rely on just these cheap moments, that there's an auteurship, there's a certain thing that he's trying to say, and he says it well. And I think he's a master of his own work, and he makes incredible movies. And I think you should study him, if not for the incredible blocking, for the deep focus, but also for how he's able to create these locations, create incredible performances from his actors, and how he doesn't rely on the cheap, easy things to go to all the time. He makes it complex, and he makes it difficult, and it works out so much better for that, because he was creative at his time. An incredible director. That doesn't have a distinct visual style, but has so many different little things that when you study, you pick up and you see the narrative sort of through line throughout his career. At least I did. So let's talk about the first of his sort of three great movies, the first being The Heiress. So I chose The Heiress for his first movie because I really thought that this sort of represented a genre that Wyler was very obsessed with. The idea of the sort of ideal romance, or the ideal wife, the sort of doting wife that sort of occurred in sort of, not in the 40s, but the sort of 1800s. We see this with movies like The Heiress or Jezebel, or even Wuthering Heights to an extent, just the idea that, and really he explores this idea, the idea that love is a commodity to be given away, that the fathers ultimately decide, and that, they find a husband based on very sort of, not a lot of dating like we do, 5 years of dating and then you get married, or whatever it is. It's a sort of you meet, and this is supposed to be the good person, and now you're spending the rest of your life with them because they have certain traits, or they have a good job, or blah, 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 blah. And this one really looks at it, because if you don't know, it's about a woman who needs to get married, and she doesn't have any sort of distinct features, as her father puts it. She just has $30,000 to her name. So when a poor man comes and professes his love, the father ultimately is skeptical. And at the beginning of the movie, you think, okay, there's good guys and there's bad guys. I get this kind of movie. But then, as the movie sort of progresses on, it gets more and more gray. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it ultimately is very tragic for the character. It's just incredible, sort of you're like, oh my god, throughout the movie, sort of just sinking, you're like, oh my god, this is so tragic. It's almost a sort of a cringy type feeling, because you feel so bad for the characters, and it really just subverts your expectations as to where you think it's going to go. And I think there's some incredible direction from Wyler that really emphasize the movie. You have the incredible performance from Montgomery Clift and Olivia de Havilland, which won her Oscar for this movie. But I think, for me, it's the way the movie shot. Like I said, that central location I talked about at the beginning of The Heiress, where you have it feels almost like a prison, but the way they shoot the film, Olivia de Havilland, she's a very beautiful woman, but because the character is supposed to be dull and sort of boring and not that interesting, and the only reason someone would marry her is because of her money, is because they shoot her sort of her pale face on white columns and white backgrounds, makes her feel very sort of dull and boring. And then the way she the characters move around her, all the characters are much more dynamic in the sense that they're moving, they're pacing around the room, and she's always standing still. She's always sort of just like in the way that her father is so protective of her. She's almost like a doll in the dollhouse, where he sort of just manipulates her and tells her, who she can marry, who she cannot. It's treating love, which is this deep, emotional, sort of resonating feeling, into almost a commodity, into almost a game, into just throwing it around nonchalantly and then seeing the effects of that. Looking at it from a 48, we'll say 49 sort of perspective. But then, and so I look back on it, I'm like, oh wow, that's really old movie. But they're looking at it from their time, looking back at even older sort of traditions and whatnot. Sort of the idea of this Southern girl who has to marry this one guy because her father says so. Sort of these traditions that sort of developed in the States at the time. I'm looking at it from a negative perspective, but also seeing what could go wrong. What goes wrong when you do this kind of thing, when you treat love like a commodity. And I think, Wyler doesn't look at this period with rose-tinted glasses. He looks at this period honestly and shows why. It's a moral mess, ultimately, at the end of the day. It's tragic, it's heartbreaking, it's utterly compelling, with an incredible performance by Olivia de Havilland, who, struggled between loving the person versus trusting what they actually believe, and then sort of listening to her father's wishes, who she deeply cares about, even though he's sort of, protecting her. He's overly protective, and really, at the end of the day, you don't like any of the characters. You could say that's a bad thing. You want to reach out to someone, but you understand each and every person's motive. But the best part is that you don't really understand their motive. You understand where they're coming from, but is that true? Is that honest? It plays with those expectations because it treats this as a sort of a game to win. It's an incredible movie. I was very sort of surprised by it because you've never even heard of these type of movies before, but they're so rich and deep and emotionally dramatic, which you very rarely see today. Well, actually, we see it, but sort of in smaller movies. This was sort of a bigger sort of studio movie at the time, but Hollywood was much different back there, 70 years ago. But the next film I want to talk about is my favorite, and one of the favorite movies I ever have watched in preparation for one of these episodes, Roman Holiday. This was a movie that just destroyed me because of my emotional involvement in the movie. And for me, romance, I think, is one of my favorite genres. It may be my favorite genre, but I don't like a lot of the modern movies because they have to be romantic comedies. This movie is a pure romance. This is why I look at a lot of older movies for that romantic element. And even though this one is kind of a romantic comedy, it has sort of charm and cute in that sense, but it's not sort of the comedy, sort of the tropes that we talked about, later on. For example, I'm talking about Pretty Woman, this upcoming Old on Old. I talk about a little bit about there, so I can look in that. But really, the standouts here are Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn. Gregory Peck is incredible because you understand him first as this really hard-bustling news reporter, and he's on the ropes, and he needs to get the story. But when he meets the girl and he meets the princess, past the sort of drunken sort of scene at the beginning, we see this great sort of peace, this inner peace we see within Gregory Peck and how he portrays the character, Joe Bradley. The idea that he's able to just completely relax and all of his worries almost go out the door because he's with this girl. He doesn't care about the story anymore because he sort of found true love, or he found someone he can really connect with, someone he really vibes with. And then, who am I kidding? Another sort of standout, of course, is Audrey Hepburn. This is really her first big film role. William Wyler sort of credited for finding her and sort of used her in multiple of his other movies. And she's incredibly charming, and he knows how to use her in the best way. She's sort of quirky in an odd way. She's cute, but you can't help but feel attracted to her, and just sort of you feel the necessary need to sort of follow her, and just you can't take your eyes off her, and sort of a Marilyn Monroe sort of aura to her. And then I also thought that, same way with Joe Bradley and Gregory Peck, you understood her reasons. You saw the stresses of being a princess and how she doesn't really want to do this, and how she just wants to let loose. So when she meets Gregory Peck and she can do that to sort of just be herself and just be this person who is not the princess, even though he knows that she's the princess, she doesn't know that he knows, right? So she can sort of play that aspect and totally let loose and do all the things she wants to do. And I think another thing that I love is that there's an immediate attraction to one another from the beginning. There's no, sort of they hate each other and they learn to love each other. There's an attraction from each other right away, and there's that sort of emotional tension, that sort of love tension, that flirting tension that's going on throughout the movie, that's going through back and forth. And I think another reason why I love the movie is Wyler's ability to capture Rome. It's one of those places where you see it and you're like, wow, I need to go to Rome now because of how beautifully it's shot. And then, despite it actually being in black and white, it's also an amazing summer movie too, because you can feel the heat sort of radiating off the sort of ground, and you feel that when they're on the motorcycle scene, you can feel the coolness of it, or when they're at the sort of deck, sort of near the water, you feel that too. I think it's because I'm so emotionally involved and I'm so immersed in the character. I'm immersed in the setting by the incredible shots of Rome, the incredible detailness of the Gregory Peck's apartment, and just the chemistry between the leads. And Audrey Hepburn and Gregory Peck, they do an incredible job of just sort of doing that sort of flirtatious sort of lovey-dovey, not lovey-dovey, but flirtatious sort of back and forth. I mean, as you can see now, I'm almost struggling to find my words because it's one of those movies that infected me and completely emotionally destroyed me. At the end, I was just totally invested into it when it happened. I was like, no, this is terrible, I hate it. And then I realized, no, this is what makes the movie special. This is why I'm so into it. And I wanted to rewatch it as soon as I was done to get back into it. Even though it destroyed me, I just wanted to sort of see their love blossom once again, because it was so beautiful and so gradual and so real and emotional. And it's one of those things that it's breakdown with one of my sort of top, we'll say, 100 movies of all time. I think, starting to be slowly one of my favorite movies of all time, because there's few films that really affect you the way that does, and romantic movies particularly doesn't do that, but some of my favorite movies do that. Carol, Her, the Before trilogy. This does in that same way. And there's actually a quote from Her that reminds me of this movie where it's, it's like I'm reading a book, and this is when Samantha says in the movie Her, it's like I'm reading a book and the words just keep getting farther and farther apart, sort of infinitely, and it's like a favorite book that you want to read, but the words are sort of getting farther and farther away, and you're starting to read it slowly because you don't want it to end. This was like this movie, at the end of the movie I was holding on to every word they said. Every word mattered because I didn't want it to end. I didn't want them to screw it up, and I was almost I was waiting for them to screw it up. Oh, it's going to happen here. It's going to happen here. And then it never did, and it was just like, wow, it's just warm, it's delightful, it's enchanting. It's a film I can't get out of my head. I wanted to rewatch right away. Roman Holiday is an incredible movie, one of my favorite movies I've ever done for this whole series, and that's why I really wanted to do William Wyler, was because I saw Roman Holiday and I was like, I have to do this guy. This is incredible. If he can make movies like this, I have to see it. And it's a movie I think I'd recommend to a lot of people because of the emotional investment, emotional sort of destruction that happened to me, that if I could feel this way, maybe someone else could feel this way. So even though, it's hard to recommend because it's black and white and it's old, I still go to people and say, try it out, see this movie, because I just want them to have the possibility to feel what I felt, because it was such an incredible experience. I want to sort of share that with the world, and I think that happens with certain movies where you're so passionate about them that you want to see them. And I feel the same phenomenon almost with Her. I still, listen to the soundtrack before I go to bed almost every night. The score, sorry. I think about that movie every single day. I can't get that movie out of my head since I've seen it. It's maybe my favorite movie of all time. That and The Lord of the Rings are like right next to each other. And this is a similar movie where, like a movie like Her, I think about that all the time, and I can't almost express my thoughts so much because it affects me on such a guttural level. This also does the same in a different kind of way, where I can talk about the amazing cinematography and the great way it captures Rome and the great chemistry, but I can't figure out the actual feeling. It's just the realness. I feel like this hits a certain real spot that it feels genuine. And when you feel something genuine, you see real life happening almost on screen, and it hits you in a certain way, and it connects with you, and you're, for some reason, that's why, some people have favorite movies versus the best movies of all time. That's why I always did best versus favorite, because certain movies hit you in certain different ways. And Roman Holiday hit me in this certain way that other romantic movies don't, but this one, for some reason, did. And sort of I'm in debt to William Wyler, and I'll see all of Audrey Hepburn's movies and Gregory Peck even. I think they're just incredible actors, and the movie is near perfect. I think I rewatched it a couple times now, and I just want to go back to it. It's something that you can easily watch. It's an easy watch too. It's a great watch, but it's just the emotional involvement is there, and I really appreciated that. So let's stop the rambling. Let's transition over into my third pick for one of his career-defining movies, which is The Big Country. You'd be maybe surprised I'm not going with Ben-Hur. I'm going with his other sort of epic, which a lot of people haven't seen, which is his Western. It's probably the most underrated Western I've ever seen because it's one that no one talks about. It has sort of the great sort of forward aspects to it. It actually came out before something like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which was my favorite John Ford movie. Or, well, it's up there with that and The Searchers. Those are pretty close, but it has a similar idea because it came out 4 years, even though it came out 4 years ago, the idea that I'm obsessed with, we see in something like even in Young Mr. Lincoln, the idea of the East coming to the West, the end of the West, that law is going to triumph, sort of outlawness. And ultimately, it looks at these two men who are these rivals, I guess you could say, these rival towns, and there's sort of petty feud, and the man that comes in between them and his relationship with one of the daughters, and sort of challenges everything we know about the West, the sort of traditionalist values, the idea of a hero, the idea of violence. It totally challenges all that stuff, and says, what if the hero doesn't resort to violence? What if the hero doesn't really get the girl? What if the hero has to sacrifice the girl to honor his morals? And it's the idea that these two men know that the end is coming of the West. They know that the demise of the outlawness, it's over. That these guys from the East and New York that have their law and order and have all their rules and their sort of buttoned upness, they're coming over and they're starting to colonize and they're starting to really bring that over into the West. They know that the era is ending. They're almost like these two guys out of their prime. They know they're about to retire, but they're still going at it. It's really just this petty feud between these two characters, and then you have the romance in it that is there but is not there, and of course the incredible, amazing cinematography and the amazing composition of the shots. Every scene almost is painting worth. There's just, I've never seen the West almost shot like this, and there's so many different ways Ford did his entire career beautifully capturing the West. But The Big Country like this really used that sort of Technicolor wide lens. Lawrence of Arabia, these big, just incredible wides that Wyler has been doing a lot in his career, but this one, looking at the West, is probably his most amazing central location because it's incredible. Just the colors are so vibrant, and you make them feel, and you feel like just sort of you have dry mouth, and you feel like you're in the desert. It's incredible, sort of back and forth, and I think that it's really an amalgamation of Wyler's career. He takes all the best sort of things about his earlier careers and really places it into the best setting that I've maybe seen him done, which is either Rome or the West. And this is an incredible time. And just like I said, that ending shot of the two men, sort of the small feud that it really is at the end of the day, and the people that are affected by it, and how this one man who doesn't have a gun or anything, who just solves it by talking with words and drama, totally turns the Western genre up on its head, and it totally works. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure you comment below, let me know what are your favorite William Wyler movies. That's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and tune in to next month, where I think I'm going to be covering Milos Forman. Alright, until next time, see ya. Stay tuned.